Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to a new season of Conversations with Common Sense Media, our ongoing leadership series. I'm Jill Murphy. I'm our Chief Content Officer at Common Sense. I hope you all had a great holiday and you're returning back to getting everything underway. Joining me today is our special guest, Kristin Lewis. She's the Chief Product Officer with our partner at Aura. Thanks for taking the time, Kristin.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I don't know about you, but I am definitely dealing with the holiday tech hangover. Many families at Common Sense Media are. We are all kind of like hung over from the movies, too much screen time, all the things. And I'm sure there's many residual illnesses hanging on as well. Kids are getting back to school. My kids are back in school just this week, although I already have one out sick. So there you go. It's never ending. But I think what we're hearing a lot from parents and what we know parents are struggling with is resetting those boundaries, resetting those rules, trying to get their kids back on a schedule, in addition to sleep, getting back on a schedule where there's a little bit more tech and media balance in the house. So just wondering from the Aura side of things and what you guys are seeing on that end.
Yeah, I can assure everybody in our actual data, we are seeing that universally kids are spending an obscene more amount of time on their devices over the holidays than a normal time. So if you're feeling like it was just your house, just know you're definitely not alone. And it's somewhere between a third and a half of families with kids did gift new tech over the holidays. So like this challenge of they're so excited about their new device and the parent is also so anxious about how much time they're spending on that device. I think that's super widespread. So first piece of advice is just do not stress about perfection. If screen time went up over break, it's totally okay. We had a 8-hour flight and I think my kids did not even notice we were on it because they were like so thrilled to have unadulterated screen time. So we've all been there. But focusing on resetting expectations together and just getting back to the routine, bringing back kind of screen-free times, whether it's breakfast in the morning, dinner at night, and just being really consistent. Sometimes the hardest thing I think for parents is like modeling the behavior themselves of like stopping work and making it not just the kids being off, but how do we all kind of collectively adjust back, I think is the best place to start.
Of course. I feel like there's so much anticipation, right? For the parents, they're excited. We're giving new gifts at the holiday season. Sometimes they're tech related, sometimes they're not. But then there's all this like angst with, okay, now it's here and what do I do with it? And how do I incorporate it into their daily life? So what do you think some kind of more practical, tangible things are, just a couple of hits that parents can think about as they're transitioning away from the enthusiasm of it all and into the reality of it all?
Totally. I think the most important thing, if you didn't do it already, it's never too late, but really like take a step back and use it as a teaching moment to really set expectations and guardrails together. And even if your child is really tech savvy, like it is a great opportunity to make them and help them understand, the limits or the things that you're putting in place are not because you don't trust them, but there's so many other things to consider. So I think, the tools are going to vary a bit sort of depending on your kid's age and then the situation that you're in for every household. But I think some of the key things to think about are around kind of the privacy and permissions of everything from location sharing to, are you going to allow them to download new apps, add new contacts? In my house, we talk about having like a no surprise rules that goes both ways, right? So if we're putting kind of monitoring or anything on the device, they should know that it's there so that it's not an uncomfortable moment when we catch something and need to have a conversation about it. And for many parents, just basic parental controls around blocking certain types of apps, content time limits, setting bedtimes, all of that stuff, just being transparent about it and making sure the kid is kind of part of the conversation is so key. So keep it simple, keep it realistic. There is no magic answer for how much time your kids should be spending on their device, but having those baseline rules in place is definitely key.
That's great. I do feel like parents always want, myself included, it'd be so much easier to just have a magic number of this is what we're striving for. I always refer back to having those 10,000 steps. Like we know that what we're striving for every day to be healthy. And so I feel like as parents, there's just no magic number with screen time, especially if kids are on screens at school. And you have to look at the whole child, right? What else is going on with them? How are they acting before screen, after screen? What's going on with them, with their friends? It's all one life for them, online and offline.
Totally.
So it really does rely on the individual parent to look at the individual kid.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think, there it is, I think you said keep it simple. Um, and that's really key. I think when we talk about tangible things that parents can do, it can start to feel like a little bit of a laundry list. And so I think there are maybe a couple of good starting points for parents to consider, or out of the list that you had just mentioned, pick one. If you could just do one of these things this week, you're already going to be in a better place, right? So instead of trying to do everything and make it all perfect.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we've worked on with you guys as well at Aura and Common Sense, we have worked on refreshing our family media agreements. And that's a place where we feel like it's always a good starting point. It doesn't have to be for a new device either. It can also just be for starting fresh or refreshing. We at Common Sense, I think our position on that is always, it's not a one and done. We want to make sure that parents are always thinking about returning to that family media agreement and checking in with your kid, maybe every 6 months or maybe every quarter. So I'm just curious on your take on the family media agreement and kind of getting at those conversation starters, since we really think that a family media agreement is a good place to start with having a conversation. We say,
100%.
but what do you actually say?
Yeah, and again, it varies so much by age, but exactly what I said before, like helping them understand that this is not about not trusting them, and it's really about some of the risks that are out there. For my son who's 9, we create sort of these shared agreements, and you're so right that you need to change it over time. So like I missed things, right? Like I had no idea. It's embarrassing to say now because now it's so obvious, but I didn't even realize my son would be able to like message with other people, strangers, on games like Roblox.
Mm-hmm.
And was using Aura's app. I learned that he was. So we had to revisit the tech conversation, right? And really have a conversation around just a real world of, hey, if somebody rang the doorbell today and you didn't know them at all, maybe they're 35, who knows, and they said, can I come in and sit in your playroom and play Roblox with you? Like, would you let them in? Would you play with them? And he's like, no, what? That's no. And I'm like, right. But so we also can't do that for strangers online. And it actually like really helped him be like, I guess that's true. I'm like, you can absolutely message with your friends. So we had to implement a new rule and kind of add it to the family agreement around, we're not going to know everything up front. But definitely taking that moment to talk them through the rules and the context behind them is so key. And I think that the guide that we have set up will help a lot of parents who are struggling, because this is not a natural conversation, right? Like don't talk to strangers and don't do these other things. They're ingrained in everybody's mind, but it is still quite new.
Right. And I think we want to get it to being a natural conversation. I think one of the other, I won't call it a mistake, but I've certainly made I've had this miss in my own life many times over. My own daughters are 12 and 16 and are essentially my guinea pigs at this point, but and they know it. But when it comes to family media agreements, I think one of the things that was a challenge for us was thinking about when to start it. And in my mind, again, as you said, I feel like I should know better. I've been at Common Sense Media for 20 years. I feel like I should kind of have a stronger sense of when to implement certain things. My virtual kids are doing great, but my own personal kids might need a little more fine tuning. And so I think we were, in our minds, my husband and I were thinking about it from the perspective of when they get a phone. Yep. But the reality is, especially for my younger daughter, a device being an iPad was introduced to her much younger than my older daughter. And so really we needed that family agreement, thinking about her activity and interactions from any device, and even if it's not her own device. So I'm curious if you guys have a position on that, or what your perspective is on kind of when to implement these conversations.
Yes.
Chat a little bit about age and stage along with that.
Yes, it's such a good point. So, kids and my 6-year-old, he has an iPad. As soon as there is a device that they're using, our advice is to have that agreement in place. And again, every household rule will be different. In our house, the iPad is not allowed on Monday through until they get home from school on Friday. And when we set that up, it worked for a long time, especially as the kids were younger. But maybe a few months ago, my older son was like, could we maybe think about a way that I could earn 30 minutes of iPad time. And I think that's okay, right? And it was actually like, you know what? It's so restrictive during the week that it's actually really making them binge on the weekend. So maybe he's onto something. So absolutely starting it early, not limiting it to the phone, and just like kind of getting in that rhythm of we need to have the structure and the guidelines. And it is also very much okay if those things change, and just do and actually go into it knowing they're going to change, and talk to your kid about that. If we're going to start here, this is why, and we're going to have check-ins to see if it's working and see what's not, and that will evolve. Just because also, in addition to your child evolving and maturing, the tech landscape and the apps they're using and what's happening on those apps and where the kids are, that changes so quickly and rapidly, and it will necessarily change kind of how you're thinking about, what you're monitoring and what they're allowed to do and when.
Yeah, I love what you said about it's more focused on use as opposed to ownership of a device, because I do think we kind of, in fact, I want to go into our document and edit it as we speak, because I'm thinking about, we talk about this handoff moment with your kid getting, again, their own device, as opposed to those handover moments when you're in the grocery line or, at Target, or you're just giving your younger kids an opportunity to kind of be distracted while you can do something else, make dinner, etc. So I think helping early and often, having those conversations to help your kid really navigate what is and isn't okay. I mean, I think instilling your position on that, your family goals and values on what is and isn't okay, again, early and often, is really a best practice.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about mental health, because I think, some of this becomes, with tools like Aura, right? It's media management. It can, and parents might think about it as just time restriction. And by the way, I do love the idea of time as currency for, earning that over time. But I think that parents do often think about parental controls as just that, right? I'm going to control the amount of time and the space that they're in. But there's so much more than that. And I think that we're talking about a lot of that here. So one part of it is engaging with your kid and having a lot more conversation around why you're setting rules and regulations and boundaries, right? But the other part of it is parents having, back to what I had said earlier in the conversation, a very good sense, or trying as much as they can to be aware of what's going on with their own kids' mental health. So you guys are looking at AI tools to help support that. So I just want to hear a little bit more about your product. We do extensive research in mental health. You guys do extensive research as well with your product use. I just want to hear a little bit more about this tool and how it's kind of, it differentiates itself from what else is out there.
Sure, and thank you. I mean, so our focus is really on fostering connection on this topic in families, and less so on controls. Like we view the kind of traditional parental controls of, blocking apps and setting time limits. Those are important things, but they're sort of table stakes, right? Like you need to do that. But I think for so many families, even if your child is adhering to the 2-3 hours, whatever it is that you've allowed them on fill in the blank, whether it's social media, what is happening during that time that they're on the device that you can't see, and you can't understand what's happening with their emotions and their tones. I think that's what keeps so many parents up at night, right? Is like what's actually going on the other end of the screen. So what Aura, I think, does that's really different is we are very intentionally not spyware. Like we want to build trust, and the reality is these kids are going to grow up and they are going to be out in this world, and you're not always going to be able to control the phone. So how do we give the parent enough visibility to feel like they know what's going on? We do use AI to sort of surface changes in behavior and anomalies so that you can spot things like signs of stress, signs of risks, changes in their sleep. Every kid has a different sort of social persona online. So some kids are super active with messaging and they post a lot, and they're really active kind of contributors. Others are more like passive consumers of content. There is no bad answer or persona, but if that profile changes dramatically, especially if you become this super outgoing active person and you start to withdraw, all of those types of signals, like you would never see necessarily in just, of course, not in just a time limit or a content blocking. So we're trying to kind of bring those signals to the forefront and help the parent with conversation starters so that it's not, hey, I have to read all of their texts and see something's wrong. And no judgment on parents who do that. Sometimes it's necessary, but it can help you sort of pinpoint, hopefully early, a change in behavior and start a conversation that feels a lot more focused on the kid and less so on like a specific interaction or a thing that they did on their phone. Because so many parents, like, you know, the thing they're actually worried about is just, is my kid okay? And is there anything I need to be worried about? So elevating it to that level is our goal.
What do you hear back from parents when you guys are doing your focus groups and your product, primarily for your product? What are you hearing from parents directly that kind of speaks to the product decisions that you make?
Oh, it's a great question. So you do have to earn the trust, right? So our decision to basically not say, hey, here's all the messages they sent today, go ahead and read them. That's hard for a lot of parents. Some of them genuinely want to do that. But our position is we're helping you spot the moments where you might actually need to go be like, hey, I saw something odd, what's going on? And if you want to go read those texts, you still can. Many of them, when we ask the next question of like, well, what are you looking for? Why are you doing that? We overwhelmingly hear that parents are so overwhelmed and that they don't actually know what they're looking for on their kid's device. And so even if they're spotting everything, they don't know what they missed, and that anxiety is there. So generally the feedback is really positive. The capability we launched recently, we noticed in our data that the use of AI chatbots among kids of all ages was skyrocketing, more so than social media. And I know I, as a parent, would never have thought, I better look and see if my kid's engaging with an AI chatbot on their phone. Like and you would never expect any parent to. So surfacing those types of trends and being able to help a parent very easily see like, hey, your kid is engaging on AI chatbots. And by the way, here's the themes of the conversations. And here's the chatbots that are actually pretty risky. That's really helped us earn some trust around, hey, if you're just focused on trying to monitor every single thing they do, A, it's not sustainable, and B, you might actually miss the forest for the trees, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Having access to all that information about your kid. My daughter's, you know, they've come in and out of like, yeah, you can look at everything, and then being very private at the same time, and which makes me, of course, more intrigued.
Right.
And
yeah,
you know, sometimes when I've read stuff, I just feel like it's just so silly, right? Like just letting them have their space to be silly. But yes, I think that angst and that fear and overwhelm, it's real. And I think this is a generation of parents dealing with that. We have more information at our fingertips than ever before, but we almost don't know how to parse it and what to do with it. So we have access and giving ourselves that access, but then what? So I like the philosophy that you guys carry around thinking about, and again, this is why our partnership is so lovely. We come from the same place of why do you have that angst around this? What else is going on under the surface that is giving you this concern about your kid? And of course, there's many, many situations where parents need a much more transparent access to what their kids are doing online. There are risky behaviors going on. There may be a lot more at play. I think the majority of the conversation that we're having is more around like that surface of, could they slip into something? What are they slipping into? How far could they actually go? And how much of it, you know, we almost need like a comparison chart around teen behavior then and teen behavior now. Is chatting in Roblox to somebody that you don't know the equivalent of meeting someone at the mall and having a conversation? And so I think there's just, you know, we're kind of learning as we go. So I think there's a lot there for parents to kind of just hold and not necessarily react to immediately.
exactly. I totally agree.
So just jumping back into AI a little bit more, just thinking about from a product perspective, there's so many changes coming, right? And I feel like parents, myself included, we're dealing with it in our daily lives, in our work lives, but I'm not necessarily seeing it hit my kids on a day-to-day basis yet. What are you guys starting to see as far as your product is concerned, where kids are spending their time? In addition, you've already mentioned the chatbots. And how do you kind of see, what's your prediction on that? Where do you see it going a little bit?
Yeah, it happened quick is one thing. And it's actually interesting to see sort of the comparison of like how are kids using AI relative to how they talk to friends. So if you think about the chatbots specifically, like almost 50% of kids that are talking to AI chatbots, and it is almost 80% of kids that we're seeing do this. And I don't mean to scare anyone on the phone, because some of it is totally healthy. Like kids are, generating images or getting, homework help or creating, music. Great. But about 50% of the time it's for companionship, and about 40% of the conversations that they are having with chatbots for companionship turn into violent topics, which is a scary thing. And then about half of those violent conversations turn into like sexual role play conversations. The other thing that we're seeing is just the length of those conversations. So when you look at like the average word count of when a kid is texting with their friends, it's very, very short. It's like something like 12 or 40 words. It's 1,000 with AI chatbots. So they are having these long, thoughtful, extensive conversations. And when you think about why, it sort of makes sense, right? These chatbots are there 24/7. There's no judgment. It's not a real human. I think they're kind of having these conversations they maybe wouldn't have with a friend as openly. So it's very new. So we're monitoring about 250 different AI platforms, and we have a model that can kind of flag where are the pockets of like real risk. Like there are just certain types of character AI tools and others that tend to draw the more scary conversations. So I do think there's going to be great things. These kids are going to grow up with AI. They're going to use it in their everyday life as they continue to get older, but we're still monitoring very closely just how does this continue to evolve. But it has been really shocking to see over the last 6 months just how steep the curve has been in terms of adoption.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, like I said, while I don't think about it as being like something that kids are adopting, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth, that the moment that it got on a device, as there was an app placed directly on Apple devices, I think we saw this uptick happen really dramatically, and for adults and kids, right? And so we know that there's tons of benefits. There's always great opportunities that come along with new technology, and there's always a lot of perils that come along with that. I just want to be clear with the research that you guys did, it is based on, so the numbers that you're citing are based on the users of Aura.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the users that are on the Aura app. So we're monitoring all of their online activity, and it's just that pocket of individuals. Correct.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting here nodding as you're saying those statistics and telling me, and I've read this report about the conversations that are happening with kids. I mean, it's really alarming. I'm nodding, but my internal dialogue is, oh my God. So I think that there's just an again, it adds to that overwhelm of, now we've got this information, we can bring it to the parent, but now what? So just a step-by-step a little bit on, you get this information as a parent. How do you even start to think about whether or not your kid's on an AI chatbot? And what do you think, from your perspective, a parent should go and do next? So they're sitting there, they're listening to this conversation. They're as horrified as I am. And now what?
Yeah. So if you are not sure if your kid is using AI, I do think it's totally appropriate to have a conversation. Like, as I bet most of the people listening to this, I know I do, I use AI for professional and personal reasons all the time. And there can be really, great productive reasons to do so. But asking, your kid, like, are you using any AI apps? Like, I use Gemini at work for ABC. They will tell you most likely whether they are or not. And if it's approached that way, of like, how do you use it? And like, if you are comfortable sharing with your kid, like, how do you use it? Like, what's good, what's bad, what have you noticed? I think just making it a non-taboo topic so that they can talk to you about it, that would be my best advice. Because again, some kids are getting real value out of it and are being really creative and are doing great things, and it's probably not going anywhere. So just know it is not all bad. And if you look at their phone and they have a few AI apps on their phone, it is not necessarily a red flag. But there are definitely, not every AI app is created equal. And if they're going there for companionship, it might be something to, start to do a little bit more research on and definitely make sure you open the conversation.
Yeah, agree. We do a lot of work on this area as well. We have a Parents Ultimate Guide on AI chatbots. We just feel like there's a lot for parents to really understand and unpack before making a quick, again, reaction and decision. And
Absolutely.
so that guidance is out there for parents as well. I totally agree with everything that you're saying. I just think parents kind of taking a little bit of a pause and doing some self-education and not being afraid to have these conversations. I said this earlier, I'm going to say it again, both family media agreement, and even topics that feel kind of mature in nature end up having to start at a much, much younger age now that technology is in the mix with raising kids. So, we used to do a lot of our work thinking about age and stage, and when might a kid get exposed to online porn, or when might they engage in a conversation with someone they've never met before. That stuff is happening so much younger. So there's levels of discussion that are age appropriate that parents can have with their kids around these topics, and not to, terrify them, but I think kind of to ready them for what they might come across. I think both of our organizations come from this place that you have to start from a place of trust with your kid. Otherwise, they don't want to be monitored. They don't want to be yelled at and scolded and told what they can and cannot do. I already said it earlier that when my daughter tells me not to look at her phone, it only makes me want to look at it more, because
Totally.
that's my emotional intelligence right there for you. But I think
they're so smart, right? Like if they feel like it's taboo, they are motivated to hide it from you. And the best thing is that they feel like they can go to you without judgment and ask about it. So
right. And I think that's the case, for the parents that might be on here feeling better or making decisions not to get their kid a device. They're watching it somewhere. They're going to watch it on their friend's phone at school. They're going to use a lot of devices in their lives, whether or not they are. So it's still in all of our best interest to prepare our kids and help them navigate that world, and instead of covering their eyes, just being able to communicate with them about what is and isn't okay. So I think it's really helpful insight to hear what you're seeing on the back end, the outcomes of kids being on devices, so we can kind of get a sense of both what to expect and then the reality of it all. So we've covered so much in a very short amount of time, and I could talk to you all morning. I feel like there's just so much to continue to jump into. But again, excuse me, for our audience, I wanted to recap a little bit of your key takeaways and what you think, kind of like, again, at the end of the day, if someone's listening to this discussion, what are kind of like the 2 or 3 things that a parent can consider doing today?
If you don't have that tech plan in place, create one. And you can absolutely anchor it in, hey, it's a new year. There's so much changing so fast. Let's sit down and do this together. And you can also, make it kind of you're doing one too, right? As the parent. So put one in place so that you have that baseline. And then plan to come back to it. I think revisit those rules as the technology and habits change. And especially as once you have a plan in place, you will start to see the results of it. And some things will work great, others won't. So it will be a great thing to get a habit going on. And then if you can, maybe put an intentional cadence in place around having discussions with your kid about how is it going and the responsibilities that they have being a device owner, and just get comfortable having that conversation regularly. And it might even become something that you and your kid start to look forward to. There's hope.
I'm waiting on that. It's always a good conversation as a lead up to getting a device. Then they're engaged and excited about it. It's on the opposite end, post ownership, a couple years in, where they feel that, I don't want you in my business.
Yeah, they're like, can't you go away yet?
Yes, I'm doing it with both. The 12-year-old, it's a lot of anticipatory conversations, and the 16-year-old is like, I'm 16. And to me, I'm like, you're still a baby. Anyway, so this has been excellent. I really appreciate all the insights. Thank you for joining us today. I know that we're going to continue to have a few conversations throughout 2026 with the Aura team. And getting a lot of those insights from your data has been really invaluable. For those of you watching, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have more of these coming up. Next week, we will have a conversation on AI toys. So for anybody who purchased one or maybe avoided them during the holidays. Tune in. Thank you so much for joining this edition of Conversations with Common Sense Media, and we will see you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.